issuers should not treat smaller investors like dumb money, and they need to give them good deal terms.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. I have one of the authorities on regulation crowdfunding here with us today, Andrew Dix. Don't know if you like me saying that, but it's true. Get to see this gentleman in action at some of the top conferences, follow his webinars. He's the CEO, founder of Crowdfund Media. They've created Crowdfund Insider, and as I mentioned, one of the top publishers, if not the top in this space. Andrew, thanks for taking the time to join the podcast here today.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time on your podcast, which is awesome. And we recently connected at the Reg A conference in New York, so it's good to connect again so soon.
Absolutely. There's only so many groups working within this vertical of regulated investment crowdfunding. I know you've been involved since the early days. Was even hearing you talk about some of the background on the legislative side of things, but thought we could familiarize the audience with your story, your background. How did you get involved in this world of investment crowdfunding?
So that's actually a really interesting question, and yes, there was some methodology to the madness. So I was involved with traditional media, broadcast, print, etc., doing digital some years ago. But at the same time, I always had an interest in finance and financial services. I was an economics major. I had gotten a master's in business, and then I went on to take additional classes only in finance. And it was just always kind of an interest and passion in mine. And so when the Jobs Act came up, I actually had a friend who was an investment banker who said, hey, you should look at that. There's going to be a conference or a meet and greet here. We should go there and listen to what they have to say. And I went to this. I thought it was really interesting. There were a lot of people there that were interested in becoming portals or getting into the space. And I thought, okay, this is just going to be a flood. But at the same time, I have this media background, and traditional media was really sucking back then. And in many ways, it still sucks today. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to get into a space that is growing, it's niche focused, and it's also data rich. And so I kind of started it on the side. And over time, I said, well, I need to, put the full effort behind this if I want to see it go anywhere. And so, I transitioned into running this full time, which means 7/24 pretty much for anybody who's in early stage or has that entrepreneurial zeal. And it's been an interesting ride. Right? I mean, it's you've been doing this for a long time. You've been doing this for over 10 years. So I'm sure you have the battle scars and success stories as well.
It's true. I feel like I learn more from the scars. And what's interesting to you about the space? How has it panned out since you first got involved? I know you have a passion for capital raising for early stage to mid-market organizations. Where do you see this whole vertical going, and how's it been unfolding since you first put your toes in the water?
Okay, so as you know, the Jobs Act was signed into law in 2012. That doesn't mean it became law in 2012. It actually took the Securities and Exchange Commission a number of years to finalize the rules and create an ecosystem of securities exemptions that were actionable for issuers. And it was Reg D 506C, Reg A, Reg CF. So it took a lot of time for the industry to get up and running. And I think for a lot of the early adopters, the early platforms that want to get in this space, it was very difficult because they were ready to go, but the regulators were not, and that was kind of painful, I think, for everybody. Meanwhile, while we were watching this from a news side in the United States, we were watching the industry kind of move forward in the UK. And so I always kind of look to the UK as a leading indicator of what this industry, could become or should be at this point in time. That being said, it's taken some time. Today, online capital formation is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's still very much in its infancy. Platforms and broker dealers and people like you continue to experiment and grow and try different things to provide access to capital. And as I was saying earlier, I think that one of the greatest things about this country is we're a country of risk takers and innovators. Yes. And it's these people, the entrepreneurs that are at the top tier of society, the people that are taking the risk and being creative and innovating, they're the ones that are driving wealth and prosperity and economic success and job creation. And it's incumbent upon all of us to recognize that fact and support it. So to step back a little bit, I also have a little bit of a background of being in Washington, D.C., and I have some perspective as to how things work or do not work inside the Beltway. And that was kind of another factor of me getting involved in this industry. I'm a true believer in a market economy and creating opportunity for everybody. And I think this is a unique point in the history of the United States where we can really boost that opportunity for everybody. But you need to work at it. It's not easy.
It's not easy is a fact. I work with some founders, some issuers that had misconceptions around the space, thinking, hey, all I need to do is get my deal online. I could raise up to $5 million with the Reg CF. Sure, I need audited financials, but I could do it. We could do up to $75 million on a Regulation A+ campaign. And they find, hey, I got to put a lot of work into this. I find the most proactive founders have the most successful campaigns. I put together traffic projections based on average conversion rates to demonstrate how much of an audience they need to drive that offering to see performance. And I find it's really the top 10% of issuers that move. The bottom 50% are pretty stagnant. Is that what you're seeing across the board? And I love how you painted the picture of the founder, the entrepreneur. That's why I got involved in this space. That's what I subscribe to myself as an individual as well. But it's all about giving those entrepreneurs the right tools towards success, the right map. And, I know it's easy for me and my team to point to our greatest successes or other groups, but that could send the wrong message. It's a matter of saying, hey, Mr. Founder, Mrs. Founder, this is what you need to do to fully utilize these vehicles. Do you feel that message is becoming more clear in the space? Are you starting to see, more education result in stronger fundraisers as a whole?
Yes, I do. And it's because of people like you. It's because of platforms that are becoming more established. It's because of broker dealers. They're getting engaged in the space. We still need more policymakers to be supportive of the industry. That being said, it's one of those things that everybody wants it to happen yesterday, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a long time for that industry to really develop and grow. I think you've seen meaningful changes when the SEC under Jay Clayton raised the funding cap of Reg CF from 1.07 million to 5 million. That made a lot of sense. I think that it should go higher. I think it should go to 10, 20 million. You also saw Reg A Plus move up to 75 million. I think that could go higher too, but that's a little bit different type of ecosystem. And I think there's some tweaks to Reg D 506C that could improve that ecosystem as well. It all comes back to streamlining the process of raising money, being fraud aware, right? Because fraudsters are going to fraud, and you haven't seen a lot of fraud in CF and A plus. Reg D, it's a little bit different. 506C less so, but we need to create that ecosystem as a people, as a population, where risk takers can raise the money that they need to execute on their business plan. And we also have to embrace the fact that many of these companies are going to fail. That's the way capitalism works, right? And people need to understand that going into this, especially investors with their eyes open. And I think if they do that, it can be meaningful. You look at, venture capitalists and professional investors, they know that, 9 out of 10 of their investments are going to do nothing or just, kind of bounce along. But maybe that one will knock it out of the park. And we need to look at the industry from a portfolio basis that, over time, how many of these companies are becoming successful. That doesn't mean hugely successful. And some of them are going to be big successes, but they're successful where they become a viable business and they're generating income, they're generating jobs, and investors are getting a return on their investment. We need to look at it like that. I think that people tend to look at like, this is a huge, failure, big blow up drama. It's so exciting to write about, clickbait. That's the easy way out. The reality of it is that if you want an innovation-driven economy, you need more people like this, and you need more money doing this, and you need to say this is a good thing, not a bad thing. We don't need, regulators and policymakers, elected politicians out there saying, well, we need to protect widows and orphans. No, they need to say people need to understand that risk, and then they can do what they want with their money. So heading in the right direction, we need to keep fighting and pushing this industry forward.
Absolutely. It was brought up to me years back that you could go into a casino and, place any bet.
Yeah.
Yet there's all these rules, even with Reg CF, but, before that, it was just accredited investors, pre-May 2016. So I applaud everything you're saying. Couldn't agree more. What does slow it down with regulators? And that's not to point my finger at them. It's more to educate myself. I was first taught about Reg CF in 2014, and I was, going into effect, and it was just a matter of when, not if. We had advertising live back in May 2016 on campaigns. We were working on before that, Fundable and Flash Funders and Crowdfunder that turned into more of the Reg CF platform. We had some other Flash Funders at that time. What is the process? Why does it move slower? What will it look like to get to 10 million, 20 million as the Reg CF cap or higher on Reg A, or some of the changes you were mentioning for Regulation D 506C?
Yeah, so, regulators are going to regulate. You point these people and you hire these people to do a job, and, they're hammers looking for nails. And so they're out there saying, well, we need to show that we're doing something. The same thing with, members of Congress. Well, you sent us to Congress to write laws. Well, yeah, but, you could also reduce the number of laws and streamline things. And so it ends up being a rather convoluted process. At the same time, capital formation and access to capital, it's not a big vote getter for districts and states. And so much of, elections and the politicians today, they're so driven about sound bites and catchy themes and boosting the narrative that this stuff doesn't always look sexy. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but you get too much of that. And, everybody wants to be on, Fox and CNN and MSNBC. Everybody wants to get their 15 seconds, and to talk about access to capital, providing opportunity for entrepreneurs, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to communicate. So that's a hurdle. And I would say that right now, the SEC under Chairman Gary Gensler has been described by some people, some insiders, as the anti-capital formation commission. And that's because he's really veered away from, okay, how can I make this better, to, well, let's pursue political and social ambitions. And that's just because it kind of aligns with the narrative, the politics of the day and the current administration. which is kind of a shame. He's a very smart person. He still has like changing the definition of an accredited investor as a top agenda item. He basically wants to make it more difficult to be deemed an accredited investor, thus reducing the number of individuals that can participate in Reg D securities offerings, which could damage our ecosystem as it stands right now. But that administration is going to go away, and we're going to have a new one come January, and we don't know who that's going to be, but it's going to be different, and it can be totally different, with either candidate. You just don't know. You have a few, I think, core people in this industry fighting to push this forward. It's still very young. You don't have a lot of hot money like you've had in crypto and blockchain, and money talks, right? Yeah. And we've seen that time and time again. Just look at Sam Bankman-Fried. He had this, all this money. He was pilfering. He was, giving it to both sides of the fence so he could influence things. But that's just part of the process. And the thing is that everybody that's involved in this industry, like you, like funding portals, and like the broker dealers that engages us, they all want to be compliant platforms. They want to have good offerings. They don't want to do fraud. They want to do things the right way. And policymakers should embrace that. The SEC should embrace that. FINRA should embrace that. Congress should embrace that. And too often, they don't.
It's a shame. And I've heard from some of the portals, some of the groups on the legal and accounting side, the types of calls they have with the SEC and FINRA, and it seems like longer, unnecessary processes. When I hear about an issuer who's about to do a Regulation A plus campaign, whatever time they tell me for launch date, I tack on additional months just as my own projection. And for me as the marketer, how to really leverage that period of time to build more of an audience so that the first day, the first week, the first chapters are more successful, more powerful, more people involved. I would love to see more awareness of Regulation CF, Regulation A plus, Reg D. I'd love to see more of it come from regulators, from the government as a whole. I've heard ideas of tax credits for investors. Yes. And that's been brought up as part of the CFPA, the Crowdfunding Professionals Association meetings. I find it funny, and the way you said money talks, cryptocurrency, 2017, 2019, I found people in my personal life coming to me every day explaining what initial crowd sales were all about and different exchanges, and there was that hype around it. Meanwhile, every day I was explaining to people what equity crowdfunding, what investment crowdfunding was. And to this day, it's somewhat similar in the fact that every day I'm explaining to people what regulated investment crowdfunding is. It seems to lack that momentum. Maybe it's more investor success stories. You saw people in the cryptocurrency and digital asset community driving around Lamborghinis back then. I think it's
yes, we did
a little bit now, but the liquidity really stood out. Maybe we need a few big exits, some more IPOs, ones that continue to do well post IPO. But maybe it's the tax credits as a whole. I really envision these vehicles to be the primary tools towards capital formation 5 years down the line. So I'm just constantly asking myself, what's it going to be? What's it going to take? We've got plenty of great issuer success stories, but how do we get the investor success stories? How do we get national attention and adoption?
Yeah, no. So you jumping back to crypto, because that was a crazy time, and you were there, and I was there, talking to these people, watching this. I mean, so much of that was just, it was just kind of, pump and dump fast money, which gives you, it's really a rush. It's a, it's a sugar high, right? And so many of these people, it was a lot of them were scamish, as you know. But what you did have, as you pointed out, was that liquidity. And, who was the guy who got caught holding the bag when things tanked? You didn't know, right? You tried to sell it up here. Sometimes you lost it down here, but it was exciting. And it shows the interest of people in participating in these type of exchanges or these type of investments, if you can call them that, if you have that liquidity. On the other side, you have the regulated ecosystem that we're talking about, which is CFD and A+. I think that the regulated exempt offerings can learn something from the crypto side. At the same time, I think digital securities enhanced with blockchain tech is part of the future, right? So a lot of this is going to merge together. You're already seeing some of that in different jurisdictions, not as much in the U.S. Some in the U.S. you have some platforms that are enabling this, but you're seeing laws come in the U.K. and in the EU. You're seeing platforms in Singapore and other places that are really looking to enable this type of innovation while maintaining consumer protections. And I think that's really a good thing. I want to jump back to the tax exemptions. This is something that I'm really big on. I think this is huge. In the UK, you have something that's called the EIS, SEIS, and VCTs. And Enterprise Investment Scheme is EIS, Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, and then Venture Capital Trusts. And these all create a tax exemption for people who back firms that have qualified for one of these schemes. I know schemes in American English is something like, dangerous, but in the UK, it's okay. So if you qualify for this, you get these material benefits. So to simplify things, say I invest, $10,000 in this startup. Well, I get to immediately write off, say, half that from my taxes. Then after X amount of time, if I get a good exit, there's no capital gains. So that has the effect of mitigating the risk. And that risk mitigation obviously encourages more people to do this. They say, well, this is risk capital. I'm going to put some money into this. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I know I'm going to reduce my taxes, year one. And then if it does hit, no capital gains, that's big. And I would like to see something like that on a federal basis in the United States. Yes, it's a subsidy. And in general, I am not for subsidies. But I think if you want to craft a program that supports an industry, you want to do something that supports the innovation economy, entrepreneurs. Give these people the money, because you know what happens to that money when they get that? They spend it. And do you know what they spend it on? Equipment, offices, employees, right?
Yes.
Software development. They put that money to work. And typically you have a group of people there that are working more hours than they thought they could ever work if they're doing it correctly. And if it fails, okay, well, that money went into the economy. It was supporting other jobs. But a lot of those people, they say, okay, this one didn't work out, but I'm going to try and do it again. And you take all those skills, all that experience that you garnered from that early stage venture. And this is way better than taking a class at Stanford, okay? Because you're going in there and you're living this life and you're seeing how hard it is and you're doing real things, not reading, talking about it. You're doing real things. That's what you want to do, because you create this population of people that learn and gain and do it again. And that's why Silicon Valley became so awesome. That's why, New York, it continues to be a hotbed of innovation. And that's also why you're seeing other smaller ecosystems develop, because people say, hey, I can do that too. Let's do that. Because, if I do this, I may gain these big rewards. The interesting thing is a lot of these people don't just do it since, hey, I want to get rich. It's more because they say, hey, I have this great idea. I want to pursue this. I want to do something. I want to change something. And you know what? If I make a lot of money while I'm doing it, awesome. And then the people that make all that money, they don't just hide it under their bed or bury it in their backyard. They're like, you know what? I'm going to support these other people. And they put their money in VC funds. And it creates this awesome economic development system. There's a reason why Google and Apple and Facebook and Amazon started in the United States. It's because they could, right? They're not launching in France. They're not launching in Germany. I love these countries. But you know what? It's easier in the United States, and we need to make it easier, not more difficult. We need to make it easier because it creates prosperity, wealth, jobs for everybody.
I've done a lot of these podcasts. I don't know if I've ever been more excited about being an entrepreneur and supporting this innovation economy, other than hearing you speak about it. I hadn't heard it broken down that way either of, hey, the money is getting pumped back into the economy. If it doesn't work from one startup to the next, you mentioned the success rates of early stage companies aren't great, but you painted a great picture of how they then move from one project to the next, and with more experience, stuff you can't get in school, stuff you can't put the time in unless you're doing it firsthand. And they say to be an expert at something, you need to fail at it every way that you can. They're more likely to be successful. You know, you go to these pitch competitions, and they have in Los Angeles. I've been to up in San Francisco for the startup ecosystem, and you know, hey, it's his fourth company. Maybe he's had 3 exits, maybe he hasn't. It still says something that he's gone down or she's gone down that road that many times. And when you talk about access to capital alongside this, and we speak about how many groups fail because they're underfunded, we can see, hey, this is an area where we can have a real impact. And this is very American. This is why Google and Facebook and these other organizations come from here versus these other places. And how do we fuel that so we can continue to compete, we can continue to develop, we can continue to innovate for years to come?
Yeah, and these other countries, they want that. And the UK is actually doing pretty good, especially when you're talking about fintech. They've done an awesome job with that. Israel, the innovation nation, and I've been there many times. I've gone to a venture event that our crowd has put on in years past. They didn't put one on last year, but it's amazing because everybody's either a founder or VC. People want to create this. They want to develop this. And while some jurisdictions are doing a good job, others have structural issues that are difficult to overcome. Like France wants to create this, and Germany wants to create it. And they've had some successes, and I think that's awesome, but it's difficult to change that. It's just, you know, there's that inertia, that regulatory and policy inertia that is really difficult to change, to make the flow of capital easier because it's painful to do. So I think coming from an American perspective, we've got to say, hey, we've got something good here because it creates opportunity for everybody. How do we improve that? Not, well, wait a minute, let's pump the brakes here. You know, again, we got to protect people. That's the wrong approach. It doesn't work. It will never work. It's wrong-footed. And you know, you need to join reality if you say that sort of thing.
Like you said, we all want to be operating compliantly. So it's a matter of how to create security, not pump the brakes, stop, wait till the next administration. Hey, accredited investors, unless you're making this much or this much is your net worth, you're dumb money. You're not going to be able to understand these deals. You're too liable to fall apart if you take a loss. It's outdated thinking.
Completely outdated. If you go to business school, one of the things they teach you is like, when you're younger, you take risks. When you get older, you start to back away from the risk because, you know, you're going to die soon. You don't want to lose all your money. And so they teach you that in business school. Well, today, some of the best and riskiest investments, you know, come under Reg D. It's a huge market. It's billions, trillions of dollars a year. I mean, it's just an enormous market. But unless you hit certain hurdles, earn over $200,000 a year, or over $300,000 if you're married, have a net worth of over $1 million, not counting your primary household, you can't do that. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, you know, when I was younger, you know, and broke, you know, my parents may have qualified for that. There's no way they should have been invested in any of this stuff. But me, who I was, you know, studying economics, I was taking financial services classes, you know, who had a good understanding of this stuff. And if I, you know, blew it all on a startup, I could bounce back, right? It's counterintuitive, this current theme of like, you know, we've got to save you from yourself. And there really should be a qualification path for anybody to participate in these offerings instead of what they want to do today, which is to raise that hurdle, make it more difficult to be deemed accredited. It just makes no sense whatsoever. It's nonsensical, and everybody knows that, right?
Never understand what the push is behind the scenes there. Hey, I have a question for you. Crowdfund Insider, who's following you guys? Is it more investors or issuers? And on both sides, what topics do you find are of the most? What types of articles, webinars, videos are resonating the most? What do people want?
So that's another good question, because sometimes what I think will resonate, I totally get it wrong. So in all honesty, it continues to be a situation where you experiment, do, redo, experiment again. We do cover issuers. We tend to cover issuers if they reach out to us, because we always appreciate that. We try to look and see what's going on, something that's unique and different. If they're in fintech, that's kind of like, that's a double win for us. We do like that. We don't give investment advice for anybody in anything. That's not our role. If we see something that's kind of cool, it's got a cool angle, well, then maybe we'll cover it. In regards to industry people, we give a lot of coverage there, and probably a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're heavy policy, heavy regulatory. And I tell people that I have a genetic flaw where I actually enjoy reading about regulations and legislation, and I like to follow this stuff. And I can bore people to tears, but it's also very, very important, because if you finance and financial services is one of the most regulated industries in the world. You've got healthcare and transportation, and then financial services, and you've got to be willing to play that game, as you should. Everybody wants to operate compliantly, as you mentioned, and adhere to the rules and the laws. It's just those rules and laws must make sense. And sometimes that's a balancing act, as we've seen before. And then other times, people are just creating barriers to innovation. And I think when that happens, it needs to be called out, and people need to recognize that things change and things can get better. And sometimes you have to take a little risk on the policy side, on the regulatory side. You've seen sandboxes open up in different jurisdictions around the world. I kind of like that. I don't know what's become of that, but it does give an opportunity for an innovator to work with a regulator, a policymaker, and so they can both learn from each other. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest wins there, because sometimes you get people that are involved in the space, they don't have that financial services background, and it's very helpful. I think it is very good when you're innovating in financial services that you do have some experience in that space, or you have somebody who's working on part of your team that knows what's going on, because once the regulators come after you, they're not playing nice. I mean, it's the board. They move those guns around, and they just fire and they've got unlimited resources. You don't want to be the guy that's has that target on his back. You just don't.
And there's enough resources out there for issuers today to be able to work with the right groups, legal, accounting, portals.
Yes.
You're very friendly and welcome calls. We do the same as well. So I definitely encourage any founders even thinking about using Reg CF, Reg D, Reg A plus to get in touch with as many professionals as they can, as many other issuers as they can. I find that they're very transparent in terms of what worked, what didn't work for them, where they would have cut corners, where they would have done more and quicker. So I see the community building. On that note, any issuers who are listening in, viewing here today, based on your entire perspective on the vertical and on all sides of the table, what should they be doing?
So you bring up an important point, because back in the day, at the beginning, people didn't really know how this operated, because there was no plan, there was no history of this industry, because it really didn't exist. And you needed accountants, you needed attorneys, you needed people like you that had experience. And in the beginning, you'd call up an attorney and say, hey, I want to do this. And you'd either get somebody and say, I can do that for you, having no idea what they're doing, right? Or you get somebody to say, you can't do that. That's not right. And you'd hear stories like that a lot. But today you have people that are well versed in this industry. So if you're early stage, you're looking to raise money online, work with one of these people that have a background, that's done this before. They don't have to be the most expensive attorney, accountant, whatever in the world, but they do need to know what they're doing. Even today, I hear people talk, offline that say, we don't know how this works, so we call so-and-so regulator, and they don't know it either. It's because it's still evolving and it's not always clear. Law is hard, and simplicity is even harder. But so work with somebody that has experience. There's some people out there, I'm not going to mention any names. I see their name on a filing document and I'm like, green light, thumbs up. This is good. They know what they're doing. You have people like you, DNA. You guys have been doing this for a long time. You're kind of like an OG. There's only a few of you guys that are really, focused on this space that I'm aware of. And obviously you have that background, that experience that you can share with the people that come to you. So talk to people that know what they're doing, listen to what they're saying, and don't ever believe, your own, BS that, if you build it, they can come. There's been so many great ideas that have failed, and there's been some really mediocre ones that have been successful and have, surprised me. So if you have an idea and you believe in it, talk to the people that know what they're doing to enable you to pursue your dream and your goal. But otherwise, best of luck, right?
Well, I love how you said that as well, too. As a marketer, I want to pick other marketers' brains. I want to know what's working for them. I want to be able to have marketing discussions. I welcome those chats anytime myself. But if I stayed, to our practices, I'd be in an echo chamber and just hoping the same thing that worked last year, years back, does it again. When really I need to have, fingers on the pulse of, hey, the top issuers, this is what's happening right now. I was mentioning to you how I do a report every Monday morning on campaigns that move, because I need to have an understanding of what's really driving in this space. Any campaign we launch is going to be competing against that one, and definitely encourage any issuers to do the same. Also, there's no ego to it. Don't think, hey, because I'm asking this professional for their answers, their expertise, that it shows you don't know what you're doing. Far from it. I think it shows that they really understand. If someone asks me direct marketing questions, and you could always just be very honest and very clear. Hey, I'm not sure if we're going to use you guys, but I know you've done a lot of this, and thought you may be open to a conversation. I know I want to be friends with as many issuers as I can. I can share notes with them ongoing, so it's not just a business development opportunity as much as relationship development.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And that's how I learn, talking to people and reading about people. And, I will never corner the market on good ideas. I know that for a fact. And one thing about this industry is I've met so many incredibly intelligent and capable people that are doing unique and interesting things. And not all of them have been successful. Some of them have, but it's really evolved into a fascinating industry, and I think it has a long ways to go. I think it's going to change even more as to where we are today going forward. I think we're going to see even more dramatic changes, but as I've already mentioned, it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time. These campaigns don't all work out. What would you recommend to a founder that it's not working right out of the gate, or they've hit a plateau? How should they optimize? How should they pivot? What can they do?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got a product or service and it's not, getting any traction, well, then right, you need to regroup and reconvene and say, is this the way I want to go? And I've seen, issuers and products and services that have started going down one path, and they said, well, we need to do this, and this one has failed, but this one's, become successful, and it's part of that trial and error, process. I also think, product market fit, yeah, that's truthful, but at the same time, when you're doing one of these things, you're moving so quickly that you have to be flexible. You can't just say, I'm going to keep pounding my head in this brick wall, and one of these days, that wall is going to fall down, when maybe going around it would be easier. You gotta be flexible. You gotta be creative, and you gotta be iterative and always changing. You always got to be changing, updating things, trying things differently. And if you're an issuer and you're raising money and you're not getting any traction, and if they're working with somebody like you, obviously you get the sounding wall and the perspective of all those hundreds of issuers you've worked with before. And that's just a big bonus, because you're not just providing the service, you're providing, a consulting perspective. And if you're doing it yourself, maybe you do pump the brakes and go and say, well, we're not getting the interest and traction on this. I need to fix this. I need to build a community. I need to find ways to boost my social exposure, because that's where a lot of it comes from, and I don't like Facebook personally, but a lot of people use Facebook, right? It's a platform I love to hate. But, you have to have a real strategy as to how you're going to go after that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, man. Like I said, there's been some things I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And then it totally fails. And other things I'm like, that's dumb. It's never going to, and then you get it wrong. I mean, and you read those stories all the time. You look at Airbnb and Uber, how many people turn those guys down, right?
Bed and breakfast. You hear about the people who turn down their bed and breakfasts, when it was that. Absolutely. And I know I would be wrong if I were speaking to a prospective issuer. I would have been wrong in the past, and determining which ones are absolutely going to hit the full cap, which ones are not going to go anywhere. We've been right plenty of times as well. But because of that, I try analytics tell me what's working, and have data-driven decisions from there, and managing things to a point of effectiveness.
Yeah. How many people gave money to FTX? Right. How many big VCs gave them money, and there were red flags all over the place because there was zero compliance, and the money was just it was going everywhere. But Sam was a golden boy. The best closure I saw was from A16Z, where they said, as soon as that all came out, they said, we're writing this off to zero. We're moving on, right? Okay, you take your lumps and, live by the sword, you die by the sword. Awesome.
It's true. Like you said, it's not 100% success rate. Some of our largest clients to date were cryptocurrency exchanges, not FTX. I don't want to mention too many, and some of them had massive, sharks, famous investors attached, and rug pull. But either way, what about scale? That's what everyone wants to talk about. What have been the keys to scale with some of the top issuers you've seen to date? What are the best ways to leverage these exemptions to be able to form capital to take you to the next stages of your organization's growth?
I mean, some of the biggest issuers are not always the best ideas, in my opinion. And I'm not going to start, throwing out names, because I look at some issuers that raised a lot of money, and I'm like, I'm never going to give those guys anything. It's not going to happen. I look at valuations that are there that I think that are insane. It begs for a down round, and it's not right, in my opinion. I think some of the people that have done really well, it's not only idea, it's the right time and place. And that helps a lot. And, you'll see a company that has an idea with emerging technology, and they put it together. And you don't know if it's going to happen. Sometimes it doesn't, but, we've had the benefit of, talking to some of these really young firms before anybody hears about them, because people send us, say, hey, we raised 1.5 million seed funding. Nobody runs that stuff, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll put it in there. Awesome, that's cool. You got some money, but you most of them go to zero and go away. We just had one this past week that went bust, but there's been a few that have just really time, place, team, funding, and they just they nail it, and you can see that runway's expanding, because when you do your seed A, B, C, D, F, D, it gets you here, it gets you there, and then you start doing bigger funding. You're getting to potential IPO land. Then you've had some serious traction by the time you get there, and you see the list, you see the names, and what I do like to see is more and more names that have raised money from retail investors. It's my personal opinion that the smallest investors should have access to the very best investment opportunities. And the way we've structured it now, the rich dudes on the yachts, calling it in from Saint-Tropez, they're the ones that get to, the big deals. We need to flip that on its side, and we need to create an incentive ecosystem where the best issuers, they make it easy for smaller investors to come in for the ride. And I think it's very doable, but I think most policymakers don't understand that. They don't have this experience. They don't have the background. They just, that's too complicated. Nobody can explain it. But that's what we should be doing. The little guy should have access to the very best opportunities today.
Well said. Time and place, little guy, access to the best opportunities, different, full contrast to how it was years back, decades back. And I believe high volumes of the little guy can be more attractive towards founders and the next evolutions of their entities than, one guy from Saint-Tropez, one group. And, you hear the horror stories of losing control, things along those lines.
Yeah.
I know many VCs, I don't want to, badmouth an entire, demographic or profile, whatever we want to call it. But I can tell you that the founders have shared with me the power of the crowd and that social dynamic that occurs with that crowd effect. And, the terms, everything about it can be preferred for the issuers at that point, not just to benefit them, but again, to set the foundation, to prime for further and further valuation growth because of hitting milestones and the use of proceeds going to the correct areas, and have the little guy be able to start with a company that's a $20 million valuation up to 200 million, maybe up to unicorn status. And I think those stories are really what's going to amplify the attention to the space.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's something interesting in having lots of smaller investors. I know back in the early days, they said, well, they're going to blow up my top table. Well, there's sometimes ways to manage that. I think for issuers should not treat smaller investors like dumb money, and they need to give them good deal terms. And I think that sometimes you'll see an issuer that will do deal terms that will be detrimental to the smaller investor in the long run. And I don't like that. What I do like is when you see professional money, angel or VC, getting terms that are offered to a basket of smaller investors. And I think that's something that should be encouraged, which could be done if we had the proper people advocating on behalf of this, where you could have the professionals vetting the offering, and then you could bring in the smaller investors. Hey, this is risky. You can lose all your money. We've vetted this. This is realistic. We could lose all of our money, but you know what? We're in this together. And that's one concern of mine in the industry, because yes, it's very founder friendly when you raise money, Reg CF and Reg A, it can be, but don't abuse that. And, and valuations is one of my biggest beefs too, is because, you see somebody with an idea that puts $1 billion valuation on it. That's idiotic, right? It's you can't raise money again off that if it's vapor, right? Vaporware.
Can't go back to the same investors for the same milestones. You have to be showing that sustainable, dependable growth. Andrew, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel like I could talk to you for the rest of the day here, and that we're in a lot of the same conversations and watching for a lot of the same signals. For anyone who's tuned in, if they'd like to learn more about you, about Crowdfund Insider, where's the best place for them to go? And any final thoughts that you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, so please visit crowdfundinsider.com. That's our main domain, part of Crowded Media Group. Join our LinkedIn, our Twitter account. We have several Twitter accounts. Follow me on Twitter. Send me a note on LinkedIn, except I'd probably ignore that because I get too many of them. But do reach out. Send us an email. I try to read as much as I can. With a ton of respect for issuers and entrepreneurs. They're awesome. I think the people that are powering the funding portals, the crowdfunding platforms, and all fintechs in general, I mean, it's amazing and awesome. And I'm very excited for what the future has for online capital formation and all types of fintech. And I think when you have people like you and other people that are doing it the right way, it just, there's a lot of good things on down the road.
Couldn't agree with you more. Just as excited. And everyone at Andrew's being modest. He is a champion for the vertical, an authority in the space. Definitely take him up on that invite to join the communities he's built. And Andrew, thank you again. Really appreciate the time. So glad we were able to do this today.
Yeah, it was awesome. I'd love to do it again.
Let's do it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.